Andre Demorin here from Until Gaming, bringing you a Gill Alhama'at deck spotlight. I've played Force of Will competitively since about end of season 1. I've topped multiple ARGs and GP Rhode Island at the end of last season, and let's get into it. Well, bring you Gill Alhama'at. This is the role I played at ARG AC. I got second after seedings. Went 5-1, wasn't too bad of a day. So I chose to play Gill Alhama'at because after discussing with my other teammates, we were trying to look at ways to get more value out of cards in control mirrors, and of course him having to cast Ancient Magic spells for free was the best way to do it. So his Resonance trigger allows him to get a free mana counter, and it's triggered off either a Light or Darkness Stone. And he has Mana 1, which can be removed to produce any color mana to play Ancient Magic spells. Energizes Black-White. He flips when he has 7 mana counters, and his Judgment is 0. And he flips to a 10/10 dragon with Mana 1. So when you do flip, you do get 1 free mana counter. And his Resonance becomes, when you get a Light or Darkness Magic Stone, you then get 2 mana counters instead of 1. His final form flips into a 20/20 Barrier, Swiftness, Precision, applying First Strike. But in order to flip him, you need to exile all cards, and you need to have 20 mana counters. And note that he does not have mana on this side, but he does give all your cards in your hand Ancient Magic as their subtype, and you can cast them for free. You'll probably never get to that side, but if you do, more power to you. So let's get into the deck. I played 2 Resonators, which were only the 2 Blazers, Prisoner of Flame, Swiftness Flying. He can reanimate from your graveyard. He's a recurable threat that is hard to deal with outside of removed from the game, or when he's in your graveyard, somebody removed from the game with the Necromancy's Memoria. You can pay 6 to reanimate him from your graveyard at any time. Of course, I messed up in AC and did not know this, but for all you out there, it happens. 2 Schrodinger's Observations. X-Spell, you can either do 400 damage to a creature times X and you gain X life, or 300 damage to a player times X and you gain that amount of life as well. These were pretty much my full-fledged win cons. They weren't too terrible. It can kill a Gwibber, late enough. It can attempt to dome your opponent and swing the game, so it did well. 3 Bear Magics. There's no real introduction needed for this card. It's 3 Bear Magics. Kills, Gwibbers with Bear Magic and Heartfelt Fire and things like that. If you're going to go take a big hit or you need to get rid of ability for a turn, such as Abdul or anything like that, Bear Magic does the job. 3 Viola's Machination. So this card is an Ancient Magic that your opponent has to discard a card. It's 1 black, and it gives you a mana counter. So essentially, if you don't have any mana up from your stones but have a mana counter, you can play it, for free, because you use a mana counter, make them discard a card, and you gain a mana counter. Or you can pay a mana into it and excel the mana on your ruler if you're thinking about judgmenting or anything like that in the future. 1 Element's Black Lightning. It's Ancient Magic. It cannot be countered, which is really relevant when you just need to get a big threat off the board and there might be seal mana up or anything like that. And it awakens for 4, and it's awakens, you return it to your hand. So in mid game or stuff like that, when you might have a good surplus of counters and free mana, it can kill 2 Drakes, 2 Gwibbers just for 4 regular mana and 4 of your Ancient Magic counters, which you've been getting for free simply for calling stones. 4 Dark Storms. There's not much more to say about Dark Storm. It makes your opponent discard a card at random and 1 for free. And this card is really prevalent right now versus most decks, just because you want to stall and get to the late game as much as possible, and this card definitely helps, especially for Resonators such as Charlotte and stuff like that, which might be hard to target or get rid of outside of certain cards. This card could at least make their hand size less and give you an attempt to target it with a spell or ability that you normally couldn't. 4 Ancient Knowledge. For those of you who play Magic the Gathering, it's dig through time. When you look at the top 5 cards of your library, put 2 into your hand and rest on the bottom of the library. Best thing about it, of course, it's an ancient Magic, so you get to cast it for at least some free mana off of your ruler. And quick cast getting 2 cards is just pretty damn sweet in a control deck. It was one of the bread and butter cards through the day. Did well. 3 Runa Souls. Once again, Ancient Magic, quick cast, so you can search your library for an Ancient Magic card and put it into your hand. Best card about this is you get to search Moonbeam because it's Ancient Magic, Alma's Lightning for any random 1-tech Ancient Magics. This card can search out Ancient Knowledge, which I just showed you, which can get you 2 relevant cards that aren't Ancient Magics and things like that. And Steam Explosion. I look at this card the way Ryan Valentino looks at Adam Brawley. The things I've done with this card, or the amount of damage I've done with this card, has been absolutely nuts. It's Ancient Magic, and it does X damage times 200 to target Resonator and your opponent. Red, blue, X. And since your ruler can have a surplus of mana counters if things aren't going your way, it can just do from anywhere from, of course, 0 to upwards. If I did the max with it, was 3,200 in one go. The backside of it, or downside, is that you need to target a Resonator. It doesn't matter if it's yours or your opponent's, but you do need to target a Resonator for you to get your ability off, for it to deal damage to your opponent. So sometimes that can be the downside. There's just nothing on the board because you've been removing everything, that you draw this card and you just can't cast it for a while because there's no creatures in play because you've actually been killing things a little bit too much. 1 World Flame Summoning. This card is pretty much your pseudo Wrath in the deck versus like small Resonators decks, such it can be Lumia Hook, Feasting. It's relevant against. It has 4 modes and you choose 2. It's also Ancient Magic, so that's pretty much the most relevant part of it. It does 800 to each of your opponent's Resonators, or it does 1500 to a J Resonator, or 800 to your opponent, or your opponent banishes a special magic stone. The most modes you'll choose most of the time is going to be 800 to like board, pretty much like 90% of the time. The other modes, depending on what you're versing, could be relevant. Them sacking a special magic stone could be good if you're casting this turn 3 and you want to put them back a turn on stones. Because since it's Ancient Magic, you can move counters off of Alhama'at, and on turn 3, if you haven't used any, you'll have 3 Ancient Magic counters and 3 mana, so you can cast it on turn 3. 1 Barrier Shadows. Val 2 is a deck, as everyone knows. Priscia did well in the OCG Invitational, so I expected to see a lot of Priscia. And forcing them to wait a turn to flip because of this card, or having to pay mana for like Levitanes and sacking stuff like that, definitely helps out on you not dying on like turn 2 or 3. So 1 was fine. 1 Black Moonbeam. It's obvious why it's in there. I can tutor it from Runa Souls and cast it for free off my ruler. Priscia being one of the biggest decks at the time for ARG AC, it was relevant for me to have a card that I can just tutor up and handle a J ruler without any fuss outside of like Wingsuit Refuge. 4 Ancient Heartfelt Fire. This is probably, I want to say, the second best Ancient Magic in the deck, strictly off of that I can cast it on the draw versus decks, and it does 400 damage to a J Resonator, or puts 3 mana counters on your ruler. And the fact that it does 400, that means it kills Guinevere, it kills Elves, it kills pretty much every 1-drop that's an annoyance that you would want to kill on the draw anyway. And the fact that I can do it without having to use my Energize is like just extremely relevant. 3 Soul Hunts. Soul Hunts in here because it was my extra discard spells, or a spell to destroy just a guy that was just too big, or if I didn't have a bear magic or anything that I couldn't even target. It was just a fat Resonator on board. Since I only run 2 Resonators, it's almost never relevant that I have to sack a creature. And discarding a card, I didn't care too much to discard a card. So it's pretty much either it goes for my extra removal spells for things I can't hit, or another discard spell. 1 Lumia's Judgment. So Kaguya, 3, I believe it is. I expected, if I saw any of it, I'm pretty sure I'd just brick to that deck because I have no real additional move next to this card. So I ran that strictly almost for that mirror or that matchup. It has, you know, other functions of, you know, removing Celestial Wing Seraphs if like it gets that late game that I have that much mana to just pay 5 into it. Removing like little guys, you can pay 2 and remove Wind Secluded Refuge, which is annoying because, you know, Wind Secluded Refuge can stop Black Moonbeam. So it was a versatile card, but it was pretty much for the Kage matchup. 4 Space Times. It's Space Time Anomalies. Free removals, not free removal spell. Gets -5/-5 and draws a card. And when it comes to early game things like that, that are like such as like Tamas or Elves that I couldn't Ancient Heartfelt Fire, this card allows me to +1 because I get to draw a card off it and I get to do it 2 times. And it's a solid removal spell. And the last 2 cards are 2 Death Scythe. So once again, Priscilla was probably the biggest matchup I was looking towards going into ARG AC. And I wanted to have 2 Death Scythes main deck just because, you know, taking away Swiftness and Imperishable from it in case I go to Black Moonbeam or stall them out in a turn is really relevant. As you saw earlier, I run Soul Hunt, so whenever I Soul Hunt a big creature and stuff like that, I can just discard my Death Scythe and then remove the cards, you know, later to get it back in case I want to cast a Soul Hunt, so I don't minus myself as much just because of this card. For the stone lineup, we have 2 Magic Stone of Even Home. This is the Gill Lapis Stone. So when it comes into play, unless your ruler is the new Gill Lapis, the Conqueror, whatever, the Conqueror, you have to pay 300 life. The relevant part of this card is that when it comes into play, you remove the top card of your opponent's library from the game. That line is the best line ever. You hit the most randomest things, and it's just always sweet. It's free value for your Blazers, and it's free value because you get to remove a card from the game that could have, you know, ruins your whole game. The best card I've gotten off of it is I called 2 in a row and hit double Gwibber. I've hit a hook and a seal when I called them. So just removing a card that your opponent could have won it is still relevant in this way. 1 Magic Stone of Scorched Bells, black-red dual stone. 4 black-blue dual stones. 4 Ancient Magic Stones. Now, these are the Gill Alhama'at stones. They produce either black or white, or you can remove a mana counter from your ruler to produce any color mana. This stone it was okay. It was nothing too special. But sometimes if you hit too many of these in a row, it can mess up your whole overall game plan because you're having to remove counters early to reduce mana to cast spells such as like Space Time or Bear Magic if you didn't hit like a blue Blackstone early, and that can mess up your mid game because you don't have enough Ancient Magic counters to start casting 2 spells in 1 turn. So multiple of these early can definitely hurt. If you see 1 is definitely good. But if you go to see, like, you know, 2 back-to-back, hit a red Blackstone and see a 3rd, it's going to be a really hard mitigame, really difficult. And as for my sideboard, I ran 1 Horn. Looking back, I should have main decked this because I'm only bringing it versus the Control Mirror most of the time. And if I'm versing the Control Mirror, we're probably only going to get 1 good game in anyway. So, shovels back my gray onto a deck, which is pretty much just to play in prolonged late game. 1 Death Scythe. Same reasoning, it's in my main deck. I ran 1 in board just to bring in versus Priscilla. 3 Alice World of Madness. This gives all Resonators, including your own -2/-2. It's an addition. This was sideboarded for the Feasting matchup, most of all, and Lumia Hook if I came across it. Most of the Feasting guys are just, you know, X2s, so they just die instantly. The token Feasting makes is only 1/1, so it dies instantly. So it makes it harder for them to chain Adam Brawleys and to chain Gwibbers because the creatures they're playing die immediately, so they don't stick around. So Gwibber's just always going to cost, you know, at least X, almost minimum 3 to 5 mana instead of the normal 1 plus the 2 guys it might have taken. Abdul, 6/6 double black. Your opponent's enter triggers don't happen. So versus decks like Fox, versus decks like Lumia Hook, and any other fringe rogue decks that might have ETB triggers that you would not normally expect, he just stops. So it was pretty much versus the Fox matchup because this deck has a very weak game 1 versus Fox. I think it's like almost, Fox, just runs okay. They just beat you almost like 90% of the time. But, that's what Sideboard's for. 2 more Moonbeams. Alright, 2 additional Moonbeams for the Priscilla matchup and for any other J-Ruler matchup such as Val 2. And since I can tutor them and almost cast them for pretty much free, they were just easy includes for those matchups if I come across them enough. One more Runesol. I made deck 3 as you saw. So one Runesol. I wanted to bring this in when I needed to see a Moonbeam almost 100% of the time. Most people would think that 3 Moonbeams and 3 Runesols would be enough, but versus Prissy and stuff like that, when I need to pop off 3 Moonbeams in a turn, I need to make sure I can at least Runesol for one of them and, keep going on that way. 2 more Barrier Shadows. Once again, I thought Priscilla was going to be the most played deck in ARG AC, and it just has a good matchup versus Priscilla. Feasting because, you can tie up their mana so they can't Apollo their creatures back when you go to hit a removal spell. Val 2 because Val 2 is a J-Roller deck, so that plays a bunch of Regalia, so this card is relevant versus it 100% of the time. And it makes their Judgment cost more, so easy include. And Class G Tank, it's only one here, by rank 2. Has 4 abilities: 1, tap, gain 200 life; 2, target resonator can't be a target spells or abilities you control opponent's control; 3 is draw a card, and 4 is tap is a resonator. It was pretty good in the control matchups when you just need to see extra cards, either the mid-game matchup where you need a blanket removal spell on your Blazer or try to protect your Abdul. Versus J-Ruler decks is not the worst. Sometimes it might be too slow, or like there might be enough wind-secluded refuge on the board that you can't fight through all of them with your Moonbeams. So paying 4, you could tap a J-Resonator to protect yourself was pretty much one of the more relevant abilities, but most of the time all day, whenever I played it, I just drew a card because drawing cards for free is just awesome.
Alright, thanks for the deck spotlight, Dre. Until next time.
Yep.